The snow came in sideways. It wasn't the gentle, pretty kind that settled soft on pine branches and made children press their noses to cold windows. This was a Wyoming winter showing its teeth, a wall of white fury that swallowed the road whole and turned the last hour before dark into something ancient and mean. Elias Cole had ridden through worse. He was 41 years old and had spent more winters alone on that mountain than he cared to count. He knew the sound this particular storm made, a low, hollow moan that moved through the canyon like a living thing. And he knew what it meant. It meant stay inside. It meant light the second lantern. It meant don't trust the trail. He was coming back from Hollis Creek with 2 months of supplies loaded on his pack mule when he saw the wagon. Or what was left of it. The left rear wheel had dropped into a washout hidden under fresh snow, and the whole rig had tilted hard to the side, spilling a crate of dry goods into the white and snapping the tongue clean off. The horse, a thin bay mare, stood trembling in her harness, eyes wide, ears flat, steam rising from her in the frozen air. Elias pulled his horse to a stop. For a moment he just looked. There was a woman standing beside the wagon, and she was trying to lift the crate. Her hands were bare. She had no gloves. Her coat, a thin gray thing meant for autumn at best, was soaked through at the shoulders, and the wind was throwing her dark hair across her face so hard she could barely see. She didn't stop trying to lift the crate, even when it was clearly too heavy, even when her boots were sinking into the snow with every effort. She hadn't seen him yet. Then he heard the child, a small voice, high and thin, barely cutting through the wind, coming from inside the tilted wagon. "Mama, Mama, I'm cold." The woman stopped lifting. She pressed both bare hands flat against the side of the wagon, and something moved through her body that wasn't a shiver. It was something deeper, something that looked, even from 30 yards away in a blizzard, like a person swallowing down a scream. "I know, baby," she said. "I know. We're okay." She said it the way people say things they are desperately trying to make true. Elias urged his horse forward. She heard the hooves and spun around so fast she slipped, catching herself on the wagon wheel with both hands. The fear that crossed her face wasn't the ordinary startled stranger kind. It was the kind that lives deep in the body, the kind that doesn't need to think before it fires. Her eyes found him, and she pulled herself upright and stepped, instinctively, without looking, between him and the wagon, between him and her child. Elias stopped his horse 10 feet away. He didn't move after that. He just sat there in the blowing snow and let her look at him. He had learned a long time ago that most fear needed a moment to read a room. "Ma'am," he said. He kept his voice flat, and even the way you talk to a spooked animal. Not soft, not loud. Just steady. "Looks like you're in some trouble." Her jaw was tight. Her bare hands gripped the wagon wheel. She was shaking, from cold, from fear, from something else. And she was trying very hard not to show any of it. "We're fine," she said. The wind howled between them. Somewhere above the canyon, a pine branch broke under the weight of the snow and cracked like a rifle shot. She flinched. He didn't. "You're not fine," he said. Not unkind. Just honest. "That wheel's gone and the tongue snapped, and there's another 4 inches coming before midnight. Your horse won't make the next mile in this." She said nothing. Her eyes moved across him, coat, hat, the rifle in its scabbard on his saddle, and then they moved behind him, quickly, scanning the tree line like she was looking for something else. Someone else. He noticed that. He filed it away. "Mama." The child's voice again, from inside the wagon. Thinner now. "Mama, I can't feel my feet." Something broke in the woman's eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough for Elias to see it. "I have a cabin," he said. "quarter-mile up the trail. Fire's banked and the roof solid. You and your child can sleep inside tonight. Stay till the storm passes." She stared at him. The wind pushed hard between them. Snow caught in her eyelashes. "Sleep inside tonight," he said again, gently. Like the words were an offering he was setting on the ground between them and leaving there. That's all. Just shelter from the storm. And that was when she began to tremble. Not from cold this time. Her eyes filled, not with gratitude, not with relief, but with something that looked almost like grief. Like the word "sleep inside tonight" carried a weight inside them that had nothing to do with snow. She turned away from him fast. But not before he saw it. Elias Cole sat on his horse in the blizzard and watched her press her face briefly against the cold wood of the wagon. And he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt the urge to understand. Her name was Clara. Her daughter was Wren. She told him the name because the child forced it. Wren had climbed out of the wagon the moment she heard another voice, dropping into the snow on small legs and looking up at the big man on the horse with the wide, serious eyes of a child who had already learned to take inventory of strangers. "I'm Wren," she said. "I'm 6. My feet are numb." "Wren," Elias said. "That's a good name." "It's a bird," she told him. "I know. Small bird. Fast." She seemed to approve of this. Clara had gathered the child immediately, pulling her close, and Elias had climbed down from his horse without making any sudden movements, and begun unhitching their mare from the wrecked wagon. Clara had watched him do it without speaking. He hadn't asked permission. There wasn't time for that, and asking would only have given her another chance to refuse. But he'd moved slowly and at an angle that never put him between her and the child. He noticed things like that now. The geometry of a frightened person's world. He tied their mare to the back of his pack mule's line and helped Clara lift Wren onto his horse. The child was too cold to protest the height, and then they walked. Clara walked beside him instead of riding. He didn't suggest she ride. He didn't offer twice. He just moved, and she followed, slightly behind, slightly to the left, where she could watch him. That was fine. The cabin appeared through the trees like an exhaled breath, low and dark and solid. Smoke still leaking thin and gray from the chimney pipe. Nothing fancy. Hewn logs, a covered porch, a lean-to stable on the north side. But the light from the window was amber and warm, and when Elias pushed open the door, the heat came out to meet them like something that had been waiting. Wren made a small, involuntary sound of relief. Clara made no sound at all. Elias set Wren on the rug in front of the fireplace and began building the fire up without speaking. He heard Clara come in behind him, heard the door close, heard her boots stop just inside the threshold. He didn't turn around. He stacked the wood and adjusted the damper and let the fire speak for itself. "There's a kettle on the hook," he said to the fire. "Water's in the barrel by the window. Dry clothes, women's things, are in the chest on the left there. My neighbor's wife left them some years back. Should be something that fits the girl, least." Silence. Then, "Your neighbor's wife." Her voice was careful, probing the word wife like testing ice. "She passed," he said simply. 3 years ago. He moved down to Cheyenne after. Left some things behind." Another silence. "I'm sorry," she said. So was he. He stood up from the fireplace and finally turned around. She was still standing near the door. Her wet coat was still on. Her arms were crossed over her chest, and her eyes were moving around the room the way they'd moved across the tree line outside, inventorying exits, angles, distances. Not the behavior of a woman examining a stranger's home. The behavior of a woman who had learned to map every room she entered. He looked at her only long enough to register all of this, and then he looked at the child. Wren was already pressed close to the fire, holding out her small red hands toward the heat, watching the flames with solemn concentration. "I'll see to the horses," Elias said. He picked up his hat from the peg by the door and moved toward it. Clara stepped aside, stepped back, really, giving him more room than was necessary. He pulled on his coat without hurry. "There's bread in the tin," he said, "and beans on the back of the stove. Still warm. Feed the girl." He opened the door. The cold rushed in. "Mr." she started. "Cole," he said. "Mr. Cole." A pause. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer right away. He stood in the open doorway with the snow blowing past him and the firelight at his back, and he thought about it honestly for a moment. The way he did most things. "Because it's cold," he said, "and she can't feel her feet." Then he walked out into the storm and pulled the door shut behind him. He slept in the stable. He'd made up his mind about that before he'd even finished seeing to the horses. He'd brought in extra blankets from the tack box and told himself it wasn't a hardship. He'd slept in worse places, in worse weather, for far less reason. But the truth was simpler than comfort. She needed the cabin to feel like hers, even for one night, especially for one night. You couldn't give a frightened person safety. You could only remove as many reasons for fear as possible and wait. He'd told her this arrangement before heading out with his bedroll. She'd stared at him. You can't sleep in the stable. The temperature is. I've done it before. Mr. Cole. Bar the door, he said. From the inside. Sleep well. He left before she could argue. In the stable, with the horses breathing warm and slow around him and the storm working itself into a fury outside, Elias lay on his back in the straw and stared at the ceiling and thought about nothing in particular. He was good at that. He'd had years of practice. He had lived alone on this mountain since his 34th year. Before that there had been other things, a cattle operation down in Colorado, a brief and honest attempt at a life that looked like other men's lives. But that was a story he didn't tell, and most days he didn't think it. The mountain was simpler. The mountain asked nothing of him. The work was real, and the seasons were honest, and no one looked at him across a dinner table wondering when he was going to become someone else. He heard it around midnight, through the stable wall. Thin pine boards with horsehair chinked in the gaps. He heard the sound of someone crying. Very quiet. The practiced kind of quiet. The kind that had been refined over time. The kind that knew how to keep itself from being heard by children sleeping in the next room. Elias didn't move. He lay still in the straw and listened to a woman cry herself silent on the other side of a wall, and he felt the weight of it settle on his chest like a stone. Not grief, exactly. Something older than grief. Something that recognized itself in the sound. He stayed awake a long time after it stopped. In the morning the storm was still running, but the worst of it had passed. The wind had dropped from a roar to a long steady complaint, and the snow was coming straight down now, instead of sideways. Elias made coffee on the stable's small iron stove and drank it standing, watching through the gap in the stable door. The cabin door opened at first light. Wren came out. She was wearing an oversized wool dress that had been rolled at the sleeves and belted at the waist with a piece of rope. She dressed herself. That was clear, with the particular combination of pride and catastrophe that defined small children's efforts. She was carrying a tin cup in both hands, moving carefully through the snow toward the stable with enormous concentration, as though the cup contained something irreplaceable. Elias opened the stable door before she reached it. She looked up at him, then down at the cup, then up again. "Mama made coffee," she said. "She said to bring you some." He crouched down to her level, which was something he did without thinking, and took the cup. "Thank you, Wren." She watched him take a sip. It was real coffee, not the watery pale kind, but dark and strong and made by someone who knew what they were doing. "Mama makes good coffee," Wren said. A statement of fact, and also, somehow, a small act of loyalty. "She does," he agreed. Wren studied him with those serious dark eyes. She had her mother's coloring, black hair, pale skin, dark lashes. But something in her bearing was already her own. She decided something about him the night before he could tell. Children decided quickly. They were harder to fool than adults because they hadn't yet learned what they were supposed to be afraid of and had to trust their instincts instead. "Do you have any children?" she asked. The question landed the way a child's questions always did, without warning, without apology, with a terrible precision of innocence. "No," he said. "Why not?" Just how it worked out. She considered this. "That's sad." "Maybe," he said. "You should get back inside before you get cold again." She didn't move immediately. She was looking past him into the stable at the horses. "Is that ours?" she asked, pointing at the bay mare in the far stall. "For now. She looks better. She's warm and she's been fed. That helps most things." Wren looked at him again. "Mama was crying last night," she said, "when she thought I was sleeping." He said nothing. "She does that sometimes," the child said, with a matter-of-factness that was more devastating than any emotion would have been. "She thinks I don't know. Go inside, Wren." She turned and walked back toward the cabin, picking her way carefully through the snow. At the door, she stopped and looked back at him. "The coffee was my idea," she said, "not Mama's." Then she went inside. Elias stood in the stable doorway with the cup in his hand and the cold moving around him and something in his chest that felt suspiciously like the beginning of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He finished the coffee. He went inside for breakfast. Clara was at the stove when he came in, and she had, he noticed, positioned herself so that she was facing the door when it opened. She looked at him, then at the room, then relaxed a single degree, the way a person relaxed when the door opening turned out to be what they expected. "Thank you for the coffee," he said. He set the cup on the table. "It's the least," she started, then stopped. She turned back to the stove. "There are eggs. I found them in the crate outside. I hope that was all right." "That's my crate. Those are my eggs." "Yes, it's all right." She made a sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. It didn't finish. Wren was on the rug with a piece of charcoal and the back of a flour sack, drawing something with deep concentration. Elias sat down at the table and Clara brought eggs and bread without being asked to sit, then went back to the stove and stood there with her back to him. He ate. The silence in the cabin was the careful kind, not comfortable yet, not hostile, but managed. She was managing it. "The storm should clear by afternoon," he said. Her shoulders moved slightly. "Then we can go. Your wagon's not fixed." "I know. I'll manage." "Where are you headed?" A pause. Long enough that he looked up. She was still facing the stove. Her hand had found the edge of the shelf beside her and was holding it, not gripping, just resting there. A steadying gesture she might not have known she was making. "West," she said. "My sister's in Bozeman. That's 3 days in good weather. Week in this." "I know. You're traveling alone." Not a question. He already knew. But he waited. "Yes. No husband." Her hand tightened on the shelf. Just slightly. Just enough. "No," she said. "No husband." The word no had a shape to it. He'd heard that shape before, in that particular combination. The flat, declarative no that meant don't ask more, and please don't ask more in the same breath. He looked down at his eggs. "All right," he said. She turned to look at him then. He could feel it. Surprised by the end of the question. Braced for the follow-up that didn't come. He ate his eggs. After a moment she brought her own plate to the table and sat, not across from him directly, but at the near corner, angled slightly. Close enough to be civil. Far enough to feel some degree of her own choosing. Wren looked up from her drawing. "I drew the horses," she announced. "Let's see," Elias said. She carried it over and held it up. It was a creditable effort. 2 shapes that were recognizably horses, a box that was probably the stable, something above that might have been sky or snow. In the lower corner was a small figure. "That's you," Wren told him, pointing at the small figure. "How do you know it's me?" "Because it's the tallest." Clara made that sound again, the beginning of a laugh, the one that didn't finish. But this time it lasted slightly longer before it stopped, and she looked at her daughter with an expression that was the saddest and most beautiful thing Elias had seen in a long time. Love and grief living in exactly the same place. He looked away before she could notice him seeing it. The storm did clear by afternoon. The light that came through after was the particular pale gold of Wyoming winter, clean and cold and long, turning the snow on the pines into something luminous. Elias spent the afternoon in the lean-to working on the wagon tongue. He'd brought it in from the snow, and he had the tools and the wood, and frankly, the time. Clara came to the doorway of the lean-to once, and watched him work without speaking. He let her watch. He didn't perform the work, didn't explain it, just did it the way he did everything, with the steady, unhurried focus of a man who had learned that most problems responded better to patience than to force. "You don't have to do that," she said finally. "I know. We could hire someone in the next town." "Next town's a full day's ride, and this'll take me 2 hours." She was quiet. "Why?" she said. He looked up at her. She was standing in the doorway with her arms wrapped around herself, the afternoon light making strange shadows across her face. She looked younger than he'd first thought. Mid-30s maybe. But whatever had happened to her had put age in her eyes that didn't belong there. "Why what?" he asked. "Why are you?" She stopped. Started again. "Men don't." Another stop. She looked frustrated with herself, like she was trying to say something she didn't have the right words for. He waited. "What do you want?" she said at last. And the question was stripped bare, no pretense in it, just the raw fear underneath. "What is this going to cost me?" He set down the draw knife and looked at her directly. Nothing, he said. She stared. I'm fixing your wagon because it's broken and I have the tools. I have the tools because I live alone and things break and there's no one else to fix them. When the wagon's fixed, you'll be able to drive to Bozeman and see your sister, and I'll go back to being alone on this mountain, which is what I was doing before. He picked the draw knife back up. That's all. The silence stretched. That's all, she repeated, like she was translating it into a language she'd almost forgotten. That's all. She stood in the doorway a while longer. He worked. The afternoon light moved slowly across the floor of the lean-to. His name is Douglas, she said very quietly. He didn't look up. He'll be looking for us, she said. He always finds us. Elias set down the draw knife again. He looked at the wood in his hands. He thought carefully about what he was going to say, the way he always thought carefully, not because words came hard to him, but because some things deserved the weight of being considered. How long have you been running? He asked. 8 months. How many times has he found you? A pause. 3. He nodded slowly. The last time, she said, Ren saw. She stopped. Swallowed. Ren saw. He didn't ask what Ren saw. He didn't need to. The thing she couldn't finish saying had a shape he recognized, and filling it in with words would have made her carry it again in a way she wasn't ready for. All right, he said. All right. I understand. She looked at him for a long time, like she was waiting for the next thing, the advice, the judgment, the question she'd been afraid of. When none of it came, she let out a very small, very quiet breath. I'll finish the tongue by dark, he said. You can head out in the morning if you want. Road will be passable. She nodded. Then she turned and went back inside. Elias sat in the lean-to with the draw knife in his hands and the afternoon light going gold, and he thought about a man named Douglas who had found his wife and his daughter 3 times in 8 months. His jaw was tight when he picked up the tool again, but his hands were steady. She couldn't sleep. He knew because he was awake too, in the stable, listening to the quiet that followed the storm, the enormous frozen quiet of high Wyoming in winter. And in that quiet he could hear, very faintly, the cabin sounds. The fire settling. A floorboard. The soft murmur of a woman's voice, low and rhythmic, singing, he realized. Singing something to the child, slow and quiet. He didn't know the song, but the shape of it, a mother's voice in the dark, making the world smaller and safer. That shape he knew from somewhere, so old it had no memory attached, only feeling. He lay in the straw, and he felt the loneliness of his life the way you felt an old injury in cold weather. Not sharp, just there, persistent and familiar and not entirely unwelcome, because at least it was something that was his. At some point he slept. In the morning Ren came again with coffee. This had apparently become a thing. She handed him the cup and then stood there, hands clasped behind her back, watching him with those dark, serious eyes that had already decided something about him and weren't changing their mind. Mama told me about the wagon, she said. She said you fixed it. Almost. She said we're leaving tomorrow. That's right. Ren was quiet for a moment. She looked at the horses, then at the stable floor, then at him. Do you want us to go? She asked. He looked at her steadily. What I want isn't really the question, Ren. What is the question? Whether you and your mama get to your sisters safely. That's the question. She thought about this. She was good at thinking. You could see her doing it, the way her brow pulled in slightly, and her eyes went somewhere interior. I don't want to go, she said. He didn't respond to that. It's warm here, she said. And there's horses. And you don't yell. The last part hit harder than he expected. He looked at her. This small person who had cataloged the merits of his home and arrived at You Don't Yell as one of the primary entries. And he felt something move through him that was slow and deep and dangerous. Lots of places are warm, he said carefully. Your aunt in Bozeman, she'll have a warm house. She might yell. She might not. You definitely don't. He was quiet. Then, no. I definitely don't. She seemed to find this satisfying in a way she didn't need to articulate. She turned and walked back to the cabin in her oversized dress, and Elias sat in the stable with his coffee and the cold and felt the dangerous thing moving through him getting heavier. He was not a man who made decisions quickly. He had learned at significant cost that quick decisions had a way of costing more than considered ones. But he was also not a man who lied to himself, and so he acknowledged, sitting there in the pale winter light, that something had shifted in him, something small and quiet, like a door opening in a room he'd thought was sealed. He finished the coffee. He went and finished the wagon tongue. That evening she cooked. She found things in his stores and made something out of them, nothing fancy, just onions and salt pork and dried beans and cornbread. But it was real food, the way only someone who knew what they were doing could make it, and the smell filled the cabin until even the walls seemed warmer. They ate together at the table, all three of them, and it was the strangest and most ordinary evening Elias could remember in years. Wren talked enough for all three of them, about a cat she'd had once, about her opinion on the relative merits of different types of snow, about a book her mother had read her, and whether the bear in it was mean or just scared. Could be both, Elias said. Wren considered. Can something be both? People are sometimes. Animals too, I suppose. Douglas is both, Wren said matter-of-factly. The table went very still. Clara put her fork down. She looked at her daughter with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral. That's not, she started. He is, Wren said simply. Not challenging. Just stating what she knew. He's scared, so he's mean. That's what you told Mrs. Halverson. Wren. I was listening from the stairs. Clara looked at the table, then at the wall, then, almost against her will, at Elias. He was eating his cornbread. He had not reacted to the name. He did not react now to her looking at him. Were you, he said to Wren conversationally, listening from the stairs? Yes. Was that wrong? Probably. But then you wouldn't have learned the interesting thing. What interesting thing? What your mama told Mrs. Halverson. Whether she was right about it. Wren considered this in the way she considered most things, thoroughly. Do you think she was right? About scared people being mean? Yes. Sometimes, he said. But scared isn't an excuse. And it doesn't mean you have to stay around the meanness. Clara had gone very still. She was looking at him now, with an expression he hadn't seen from her yet, not wary, not managed, not the careful diplomatic face she wore like armor. Something more open, something almost fragile. He didn't hold her gaze. He looked at Wren. Finish your beans, he said. They're good, Wren said. Mama made them. I know. That's why I said finish them. And something almost miraculous happened then. Clara laughed. A real one. Brief and surprised and quickly over. But real. He heard it land in the room like something that hadn't expected to be there. She covered her mouth with her hand as if she could put it back. But it had been there. He was on his way back to the stable when she stopped him at the door. Mr. Cole. He turned. She was standing in the middle of the room, still and uncertain, with the firelight behind her and her hands clasped together in front of her. The lamp had burned low, and the cabin was soft with shadow. Outside, the temperature had dropped hard, and the cold pressed against the walls with steady pressure. It's too cold for the stable tonight, she said. He said nothing. I mean, she pressed her clasped hands harder together. The temperature's going to be below 0. You'll freeze. I've been in colder. There's a chair, she said. By the fire. You could sleep in the chair. That's all. Just the chair. I'm not, she stopped. Her jaw worked. I'm not afraid of you, she said, and it was the most transparent lie she'd ever told him, and they both knew it, and something in her face acknowledged that she knew it. He looked at the chair. He looked at her. You sure, he said. I'll bar the bedroom door, she said immediately. He almost said something to that. He stopped himself. All right, he said. He hung his coat on the peg and sat in the chair by the fire. She disappeared into the bedroom, and he heard the bar slide across the door. He sat in the chair and let the fire warm him and looked at the low light of the lantern and thought about nothing in particular. Sometime deep in the night, he heard her get up. He heard soft footsteps in the bedroom. Then silence. Then, faintly, so faintly he might have imagined it, the sound of crying again. The same careful, practiced kind. He sat in the chair and listened and did not move. Then something changed. The crying stopped. A pause. Then footsteps again, moving toward the bedroom door. A soft scraping. The bar being lifted. The door opened an inch. Then stopped. He could see in the gap a sliver of her, dark hair, the white of a nightgown. and he understood that she was standing there deciding something. Some part of her that was not all fear had brought her to the door, and now the fear was arguing back. He looked at the fire. "Can't sleep?" he said quietly, not looking at the door, just saying it to the room. A long pause. "No," she said. Through the door, barely audible. "Tea helps sometimes. There's chamomile in the tin on the shelf." Another pause. "I know," she said. "I saw it." "Help yourself." A silence in which something was decided. The door opened wider. She came out in her nightgown and her bare feet and went to the shelf without looking at him, and made the tea with her back to the room. He watched the fire. She made 2 cups, which he hadn't expected, and brought one to him, without a word, and sat down in the other chair, the small rocker slightly farther from the fire, and held her cup in both hands. They sat in silence. The fire talked. "I was married 7 years," she said eventually. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking into her cup. "The first year was fine. It was fine." He waited. "And then it wasn't." She said it the way people said the simplest and most unsayable things, flatly, because anything else would give it too much weight to carry. "And I kept thinking it would go back to being fine," she said. "That's what you think. That's what you keep thinking. You just have to understand it better, or be better or not." She stopped. "Not say the wrong things. Not look at him wrong. Not ask for things at the wrong time." The fire. 6 years of that," she said. "And then Ren. And I actually thought having her would." She didn't finish that sentence. "When did you leave?" he asked. 8 months ago. When I understood that Ren was starting to learn things. Starting to. I could see her watching. Learning how to make herself smaller, so he wouldn't." Her voice fractured, just slightly. "I wasn't going to let her learn that." He was quiet for a long moment. "That took courage," he said. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "It didn't feel like courage. It felt like," she paused, "the opposite of courage. Like running away." "Those aren't always different things," he said. "Knowing what to run from takes as much as knowing what to run toward." She looked at him then, across the firelight, for the first time without measuring him against a threat. "What are you running from?" she asked. The question surprised him. He let it. "Not running," he said after a moment. "Just stopped. Up here. For a while." "How long is a while?" 7 years. Something moved across her face. An understanding of something. 7 years is a long time to stop," she said. "It's also a long time to be safe," he said. She looked at him. The fire. "You think I'm safe," she said. "Here. Tonight," he said. "Yes." She looked back into her tea. Something in her had loosened, not resolved, not healed, not even close. But some tight thing had let out a breath. He could see it in the line of her shoulders. They finished their tea in silence, and then she went back to the bedroom. And this time, she didn't bar the door. He sat for a long time after, watching the fire burn down. It was the horse that woke him. His horse, a steady animal not given to drama, made a sound in the stable just at gray dawn that Elias had heard before. The short, hard snort of attention. Something moving in the tree line. He was up and at the window before the thought was fully formed. 2 riders, coming slow through the trees at the edge of the yard, moving with the deliberate casualness of men who didn't want to seem like they were in a hurry. One was big, heavy through the shoulders, on a dark horse. The other was thinner, younger, rifle across his saddle. Elias turned from the window. He put on his coat. He took his rifle from the rack. Clara was already in the bedroom doorway, watching him. She'd heard something. Not the horse, probably, but something. Some change in the air. She was holding Ren behind her with one arm. Her face was the color of the wall behind her. "Is it?" she started. "Stay in the room," he said. "Keep Ren quiet." "Mr. Cole." "Bar the door," he said. "Clara." She heard the name. It was the first time he'd used it. It stopped her. "Trust me," he said. A moment. Then she pulled Ren back into the room, and he heard the bar slide. He went out the front door before they reached the porch. The cold hit him like a wall. The 2 men pulled their horses up in the yard, maybe 30 feet out, and the big man looked at Elias with the look of a man accustomed to being looked at as the most dangerous thing in a room. "Morning," the big man said. "Saw smoke from the road." "Most people do," Elias said. He stood on the porch with a rifle held loosely, not raised, not threatening, just present. "Looking for a woman," the big man said. "My wife. Traveling with a child. Might have come through here with a broke wagon. Lot of wagons on this road. This one'd have a bay mare. Woman's got black hair. What's your name?" Elias asked. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Not used to being asked questions. "Douglas Hart." "Well, Mr. Hart," Elias said, "I haven't seen any woman with a bay mare. Came through here alone. Road before the canyon would have been the one to look. That's the main thoroughfare. This is just my access trail." Douglas Hart looked at the cabin, then at Elias. "You live up here alone?" "I do. Long winter." "I don't mind it." The younger man's eyes were moving to the stable, to the side of the cabin, to the tracks in the snow. Elias watched him looking at the tracks. 2 sets of small boot prints, a woman's, a child's, going from the cabin to the stable and back, visible in the new snow from last night. The younger man opened his mouth. Elias spoke first. "I had a doe come through last night," he said, conversationally, to the younger man specifically. "Made a mess of the yard before she figured out there was nothing here for her. You can see where she came out of the trees there." He gestured, not toward the tracks, but toward the tree line, with enough authority that the young man's eyes followed his arm. "Huh," the young man said. Douglas Hart was still looking at the cabin. "Mind if I look inside?" he said. And he said it the way men like him said things. Not a question, technically. A statement with a question's shape. "I do, actually," Elias said. "Pleasant. Easy. Man's home is his own business. You know how it is." A long silence. Douglas Hart was a man who got what he wanted through the threat of what happened if you didn't give it to him. Elias could read the type by the set of his jaw and the way he held his reins, like he was deciding whether the reins were necessary at all. He was weighing Elias right now, calculating. What he was calculating was whether Elias was afraid of him. He was calculating wrong. Elias held his gaze with the flat, patient calm of a man who had decided something before he walked out the door and didn't have anything left to decide. "Road to Bozeman," Douglas Hart said finally. "That the way she'd go, you think?" "Somebody running." "Couldn't say," Elias said. "Never been to Bozeman." Another long look. Then Douglas Hart turned his horse. "Appreciate your time," he said. No gratitude in it. Just the last move in a game he was recalculating how to play. The 2 men rode back into the trees. Elias stood on the porch until he couldn't hear them anymore. Then he stood a little longer. Then he went inside. He went to the bedroom door. "They're gone," he said. A long silence. Then the bars scraped back. The door opened. Clara was standing inside with Wren pressed against her side and her face, white and shaking, eyes too bright, still wearing the expression of someone who'd been braced for impact. She looked at him and swallowed hard. Did he? He's gone. Did he know? He suspected. He didn't know. Elias looked at her steadily. He'll check the Bozeman Road first. He believed the misdirection. Probably. I won't lie to you about it. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled. She breathed through it, deliberately, carefully, the way someone breathed through pain that they'd had a lot of practice surviving. "We have to leave," she said. "Today. If he comes back." "Yes," he said. "We do." She heard it. The we. She looked up at him. "The direct road's not safe now," he said. "But I know another way. Longer, but it stays off the main trail. I know a family in Clearwater who'll put you up for a night, give you a proper escort to the county seat. There's a marshal there I know. A decent one." She stopped. Started again. "You'd take us yourself." "Yes. But this is you'd leave your." "Clara." She stopped. "Finish your coffee," he said. "Pack what you need. We leave in an hour." The trail Elias knew was an old hunting path, mostly unmarked, winding through the high timber above the main road. It added nearly a day to the journey, but it was quiet, and it was his, and he knew every turn of it the way you knew the rooms of the house you grew up in. They rode close. He led on his horse, Clara and Wren Double on the bay mare, the pack mule with the supplies, and the repaired wagon tongue trailing behind. He didn't push the pace. The horses were steady in the snow, and Wren, riding in front of her mother, wrapped in a blanket, had fallen into that state of drowsy peace that cold and motion and safety conspired to create in small children. "She's asleep," Clara said a few hours in. He looked back. Wren's head was tilted back against her mother's chest, eyes closed, boneless and trusting. "Good," he said. "She likes you," Clara said. Something in her voice was still figuring out whether that was a simple observation or something more complicated. "She's easy to like too," he said. A long beat. "She doesn't trust easily," Clara said. "She didn't. The first months, after we left, she barely spoke to anyone. She was so watchful." "She's still watchful," he said. "Just chose to extend credit." "Is that what you call it?" "What would you call it?" She was quiet for a while. The trees moved past them, heavy with snow. The light through the branches was silver and still. "Hope," she said. "I'd call it hope." He considered that. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe that's the same thing." They stopped at midday, in a clearing where a frozen creek made a small natural shelter from the wind. He built a fire quickly, the mountain kind, small and hot, and they ate cold cornbread and dried jerky and let the horses rest. Wren woke up and ate her cornbread with the methodical focus of someone who had learned not to leave food. Clara watched her, and Elias watched Clara, and for a moment the clearing held all three of them in a strange, suspended stillness, the fire and the snow and the silence, and Elias felt again that deep, quiet thing moving in him. Not loud, not demanding, just present, the way the mountains were present, existing without requiring anything of him. "Tell me about this place," Clara said. "Your mountain." "What do you want to know?" "How long have you been there?" 7 years. Before that, he fed a stick to the fire. Cattle for a while. Down in Colorado. Before that, a few different things. "What made you stop?" He thought about it honestly. "Stopped wanting the things I was working toward. The life I was building. Looked at it one day and didn't recognize what it was for." That's a lonely reason to be alone. It was honest, at least. She wrapped her hands around her tin cup. "Do you miss it?" "People." He looked at the fire. "Sometimes. Most times I don't notice. It's the particular kind of missing where you've made peace with it." "I don't know that kind," she said. "No," he said. "I don't imagine you would." She looked at him with those careful eyes. "What's the kind I know?" "The kind where you're in a room full of people and still alone," he said. "That kind's worse." She looked away, quickly, but not before he saw that he'd named something exactly. Wren had abandoned the cornbread and was investigating the edge of the frozen creek with a fearlessness specific to 6-year-olds and professional stuntmen. "Not on the ice," Clara called. "I know," Wren said. "She's incredible," Elias said quietly. "After everything, she's still." "She doesn't know how not to be," Clara said, and there was enormous pride in it and enormous grief too, living side by side. "She just absorbs things and keeps going. I don't know where she got that." He looked at Clara. "I might have an idea," he said. She looked at him sharply, then looked away, a faint color in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the cold. "We should keep moving," she said. "We should," he agreed. He stamped out the fire. The Halverson farm appeared at dusk, lamplight in every window, smoke from 3 chimneys, the sound of children somewhere inside. It was a big family operation. 2 brothers, their wives, for children between them, and a grandfather who'd built the original structure 30 years back with his own hands and never tired of mentioning it. Eric Halverson opened the door before Elias had finished knocking and grabbed him by the arm. "Cole, you crazy son, it's 15 below out there. What are you doing on the mountain? Get in here." He looked past Elias at Clara and Wren, still mounted. Something in his face recalibrated immediately. "Oh, they need shelter for the night," Elias said. "And I need to talk to you." Eric nodded. He was a big blond Swede with a beard that could house a family of starlings and eyes that were quick and kind. "Marie," he called back into the house. "We've got company." Clara was received with the full force of Marie Halverson's considerable warmth, a broad, strong woman who took one look at Clara and Wren, took one look at Elias, and understood everything she needed to understand. Wren was absorbed into the pack of Halverson children within minutes. They disappeared into the back of the house like water into sand, while Clara sat at the big kitchen table with Marie and a bowl of stew, Elias went outside with Eric. He told him about Douglas Hart. Eric's face went through several expressions, ending on the one Elias had hoped for, a quiet, deliberate anger that didn't need to be loud to be serious. "I can ride to county tomorrow," Eric said. "Talk to Patterson. She'll need an escort the rest of the way. Someone he doesn't know. My brother-in-law's crew is heading through Bozeman end of the week. I can arrange it. She needs the full route covered, not just part." Eric looked at him. "Cole, I've got it." Elias looked at the dark sky. Stars were coming out, the first clear night in days. "She's been running 8 months," he said. "She needs this to actually end." Eric put a hand on his shoulder, briefly. "I hear you. It'll end." They went back inside. That night, fed and warm and surrounded by the organized chaos of the Halverson household, Clara looked different. Marginally. The way a wound looked different after it had been cleaned. Still there, still real, but with the immediate danger addressed. After the children were in bed and the Halversons had diplomatically found reasons to be in other rooms, she found Elias on the porch. He was looking at the stars with his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, and he heard her come out and moved slightly to give her room at the railing without making a production of it. "Eric says there's a route," she said. "There is. And a man in the city who can legally, formally." "Yes. Who can make sure Douglas." "Clara. Sorry. Stop apologizing." She made a small, surprised sound. "I didn't realize I was." "You apologize for taking up space," he said, not unkindly. "For asking questions. For existing in a room." "Stop." A long silence. "That's a hard habit to break," she said finally. "I know. Stars. Cold. Coffee. Will you come with us?" she asked. Quietly, not looking at him. He was quiet for a long time. "Part of the way," he said. "Eric's people can take you from a county seat." "I don't," he stopped. "I don't do well in towns." "Part of the way," she said. "Okay." He looked at the side of her face, the clean line of her jaw in the starlight. She was looking at the sky with an expression he hadn't seen from her yet, open, almost at rest. Like the night and the distance from Douglas and the warmth at their backs had loosened something that had been clenched for a very long time. "Clara," he said. She looked at him. "You did a hard thing. Getting out. Staying out." He said it straight, without decoration. "Wren's going to have a different life because of it. You should know that. Not because I'm saying it, because it's true." She didn't look away from him, and her eyes were too bright in the starlight, and she pressed her lips together briefly. "Thank you," she said. She gestured vaguely, meaning everything. The stable, the coffee, the misdirection, the trail, the fire, the patience. "Don't," he said simply. She looked at him. "You don't owe me thanks for being decent," he said. "That's the floor, not the ceiling." She looked at him for a long time. Something moved through her face, slow and complicated and not entirely resolved. "Where were you?" she said quietly, almost to herself, 8 years ago. He didn't answer that. He thought she didn't need him to. They stood on the porch until the cold drove them in. He was up before dawn. He was always up before dawn. It was simply how his body worked, had worked for years. And he stood in the Halverson yard in the last darkness and drank coffee and thought about the day ahead. He heard her before he saw her. She came out of the house quietly, carrying 2 cups, and handed him one. He accepted it, and they stood together in the dark in the familiar configuration they'd established, side by side, slight distance, watching the sky lighten at the eastern edge. "Wren wants to know if you'll write letters," she said. He considered this seriously. "I'm not much of a letter writer. She'll be disappointed. She'll survive it." A pause. "She's going to talk about you for a long time. You know that. She'll forget by summer." "She won't," said with certainty. 6-year-olds don't forget the things that matter to them. He looked at the horizon. "Mr. Cole, you can call me Elias." She was quiet. "Elias." Trying the word. "Will you be all right? Up there. By yourself?" "I've been all right for 7 years." "That's not what I asked." He looked at her. She was looking at him with a direct, uncalculated gaze she'd been slowly allowing herself over the past 2 days. Not the measuring look, not the threat assessment, but the one underneath it. The real one. "I'll be all right," he said. "Clara, I'll be all right." She looked at him a moment longer. Then she looked at her coffee. "I think," she started. She stopped. Tried again. I think you are the first. She stopped again. Pressed her lips together. She was fighting with the words, trying to find the ones that were true and manageable at the same time. You made me feel like a person, she said finally. Just a regular person. Not a problem. Not a burden. Not someone who needed a breath. Just a person. I didn't realize how much I'd forgotten what that felt like. He looked at the horizon. You are a person, he said. You were the whole time. She laughed, the real one again, brief and sudden, and she pressed her hand over her mouth like she always did, but this time when she lowered it she was still smiling. A small, real, exhausted, living smile. I know that, she said. But it's different when someone... She shook her head. Never mind. When someone treats you like it, he finished. She nodded once. Small. Eric came out then, and the moment became the morning, and the morning became the business of departure. Horses and gear and children who didn't want to leave and children who didn't want them to go, and the organized chaos of a big family setting 3 people back on the road. Elias had his horse ready. He was going to ride with them to the county road 3 hours, for at most, and then he'd turn north and they'd turn south and that would be that. Wren found him by the horses. She was wearing her own dress, cleaned and dried, and her hair was in 2 braids that Marie had put in. She stood in front of him with her hands clasped behind her back and her chin slightly up. I made you something, she said. She held out a piece of cloth. He took it. It was a torn corner of flour sack, the same kind she'd been drawing on, and on it in charcoal was a small drawing. 2 horses, a cabin, a figure that was unambiguously the tallest thing in the picture. So you don't forget us, she said. He looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket, inside, against his chest. Not possible, he said. Wren. She flung herself at him with the complete, uninhibited force of a 6-year-old who had decided something and was done being careful about it. And he caught her and held her for a moment. This small, fierce person who'd catalogued his merits and arrived at You Don't Yell and had brought him coffee every morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. He set her down. Be good, he said. I'm always good, she said. I know. He rode with them to the county road. The morning was brilliant, cold and clear. The kind of Wyoming winter day that made you understand why people lived here despite everything. The sky an impossible blue above the white peaks, the snow in the trees catching the light and throwing it back as something close to music. At the fork, he pulled his horse to a stop. Clara stopped the bay mare beside him. They sat for a moment in the light. He didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say that wouldn't cost more than either of them could easily spend. She seemed to understand this. She was looking ahead down the southern road, at the country that would take her to her sister, and to safety, and to whatever life came after 7 years of learning to make herself smaller. The marshal's name is Patterson, he said. Eric knows him. He's good. Tell him what happened and don't leave anything out. I won't. Your sister's in Bozeman. Yes. That's a good thing. Family's a good thing. She looked at him. You don't have any. No. That's sad, she said. It was an echo of Wren from 2 days and a lifetime ago, and he wondered if she'd done it on purpose. Maybe, he said. She looked at him with those dark eyes in the brilliant morning light. Whatever she was thinking, she kept it. Whatever she almost said, she held. Thank you, Elias, she said. He nodded. She looked forward. Her shoulders straightened. He watched the thing happen in real time, the gathering of herself, the slow assembling of the person she was going to be on the other side of all of this. It was like watching someone remember their own name. Come on, Wren, she said, and she rode south. He sat his horse at the fork and watched them go. Wren turned around once, twice, and waved with enormous energy. He lifted 2 fingers from the reins. He watched until the trees took them. Then he sat in the silence for a while. The cold, the sky, the sound of his horse breathing. Then he turned north. He was back at the cabin by nightfall. He stabled the horses and checked the lean-to and built up the fire and heated the leftover beans from 2 days ago and ate them standing at the stove because there was no one to sit down with. The cabin smelled different. He noticed it immediately and spent a moment with the noticing. Something that was hers and Wren's, the particular warmth of other people having lived in a space. Already fading. He washed the bowl. He sat in the chair by the fire. In his shirt pocket folded against his chest was a small piece of flour sack with a drawing on it. 2 horses, a cabin, a figure that was the tallest thing in the picture. He took it out and looked at it for a long time. Then he folded it and put it back. He sat in the quiet that had been his life for 7 years, and he let himself feel the full size and weight of it for the first time in a long time, not with self-pity, not with regret, but with the honest recognition of a man who had been shown something he'd stopped believing existed, and now had to reckon with the fact of it. You could make someone feel like a person, and it could change them, and they could do the same. Outside, the stars came out one by one over the mountain, the way they always did, patient and indifferent and extraordinary. The fire talked to itself. The horses settled in the stable. The cold held everything still. He didn't know what came next. He thought, for the first time in a long time, that not knowing felt less like an ending than it used to. He reached into his pocket and felt the folded edge of the flour sack and thought about a small girl who'd brought him coffee every morning and had catalogued his virtues with the pitiless accuracy of a child and had decided, for reasons of her own, to extend credit. So you don't forget us. He pressed his hand against his chest, against the pocket, against the drawing inside it. Not possible, he thought. Not even close. And for the first time in 7 winters, the night felt like something other than quiet. It felt, in some way he didn't have the words for yet, like the beginning of something. That night, 3 hours south on the road to Bozeman, a woman sat beside a sleeping child in the warmth of a way station inn and wrote a letter she wasn't sure she'd send. She wrote about a mountain. She wrote about a man who moved slowly and spoke carefully, and whose first instinct in every situation had been to give her more space, not less. She wrote about coffee brought by a 6-year-old and a chair by a fire and 2 cups on a cold porch, and the particular feeling of being treated like a person by someone who expected nothing in return for it. She stopped and looked at her daughter sleeping, face soft, hands open, the way children slept when they finally felt safe enough to let their bodies go completely. She thought about Bozeman, her sister. A new life built slowly, from scratch, on better ground. She thought about 7 years. She folded the letter and put it in her coat pocket. Then she added an address. She wasn't sure she'd send it, but she kept it. And that, for now, was enough. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. More stories are waiting for you.